Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 16 of Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. Stay with us for these readings and more.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Friday, April 10th, 2026. Your reader for this hour is Chet Walzik. I'm glad you're here. Let's kick it off with the Weekend Edition's opening section and their feature story. As 9/11 centers struggle with burnout and overload, AI is stepping in to answer the call. Dateline Denver. In one of the last places where a real-life person answers the phone immediately, AI is now playing an increasingly important role in helping 911 dispatchers speed police, firefighters, and paramedics to emergencies. The most sophisticated AI systems can listen and interact with callers, in some cases by handling non-emergency calls while staying alert for something that's actually a crisis. Other AI systems can automatically translate languages to make sure every caller gets the help they need immediately. Only in rare circumstances are the AI systems directly answering 911 calls, but are instead more often being used to lighten the high-pressure load on trained dispatchers who are often working in short-staffed operations centers. When someone calls 911, they don't want to end on hold. But how do you do that in this day and age? Said Stephen Kennedy, the 911 coordinator for Sumter County in Central Florida, which handles about 80,000 calls annually. The use of AI by emergency services reflects its growing use across society, from analyzing medical images to detecting fraud and navigating driverless vehicles. For generations, 911 operators have been the backbone of the American Emergency Response Network, answering calls for help, then dispatching and coordinating police and firefighters, SWAT teams, mental health counselors, and animal control officers. In a sense, 911 is a victim of its own excess. It is such a trusted system that everyone knows to call it when they need help. And call we do. Each year, 911 operators nationwide answer about 240 million calls. But those same operators are often also responsible for simultaneously answering non-emergency calls, which significantly outnumber actual emergencies. In New York City, that's the 311 line. In LA, it's 877 Ask LAPD. While usually not a crisis, those non-emergency calls are nevertheless still important, as people call in to complain about everything from parking problems to barking dogs, fireworks, fender benders, and stolen bikes, missing cats, and abandoned cars. They call to request police reports or an extra patrol in their neighborhood. They ask for help installing car seats or changing smoke detector batteries. Aurelian, one of the companies offering AI assistance to dispatchers, found that 64% of all calls coming into dispatch centers are not actual emergencies, and that 70% of those non-emergency calls can be handled by AI without the need for human participation. In New York City, people called 311 more than 1.3 million times in March alone. Longtime police radio provider Motorola Solutions is also offering AI-assisted dispatch services, and body camera company Axon offers AI-powered cameras that can provide on-the-fly translation services. At the Denver 911 Center, workers say they're exploring several options but have questions about cost and reliability. Max Keenan, the CEO and co-founder of Aurelian, said emergency dispatchers are expected to handle calls about barking dogs or broken water lines, while also standing by to respond to a police shooting or a terrorist attack. Switching between routine calls and emergencies is exhausting, he said. Burnout is common among dispatchers. A 2023 study by the International Academy of Emergency Dispatch found a 25% vacancy rate in dispatch centers nationwide, and Keenan said 80% of new dispatchers quit within 2 years. Aurelian Systems are serving about 12 million Americans daily, from Tennessee's Hamilton County to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Grant County, Washington. We try to approach this as, how can we help them spend more time on those emergency calls, Keenan said. Because you basically train your 911 operators to be Navy SEALs, and they spend 77% of their time being mall cops. At the National Emergency Number Association, staff are keeping a close eye on how dispatch centers are using AI and how the public is responding, given publicity around the failings of rush-to-market AI systems blamed for hallucinating facts or inexplicably providing incorrect information. And cost is another factor. April Hines, NENA's Vice President for Operations and Standards, said it remains important that someone calling 911 to report an emergency hears a human voice on the other end of the line. Reassuring, competent, empathetic. People want to talk to another person, she said. Hines said some dispatch centers are experimenting with using AI systems to triage the massive number of 911 calls that are received when there's a significant public event, like a major car crash on a busy interstate or a wildfire sending up a towering column of smoke. Under those circumstances, 911 operators need to focus on dispatching emergency services to the scene, but often end up answering hundreds of identical 911 calls from Good Samaritans. Using AI, a dispatch center could temporarily have all 911 calls from that specific area answered by a computer that asks the caller if they are simply reporting that crash or fire, whether they have specific knowledge that first responders need to know, or whether they have a different emergency, Hines said. When people don't know what to do, they call law enforcement and 911, she said. These dispatch centers are really resource managers. Keenan, the CEO of AI company Aurelian, said in a recent power outage at a dispatch center they assist, about 600 people called a non-emergency line within a 2-hour period to report that they had lost power. But buried in that avalanche of calls was a person seeking help because a life-saving medical device they depended on had stopped working. The AI system recognized that person needed more immediate help and connected them with the 911 operator. In a recording of a different non-emergency call demonstrated for USA Today, the Aurelian system answered a call from a man reporting his neighbor's barking dogs. The system interacted with the man in much the same way a 911 operator would have, collecting information about addresses, how often the barking occurred, and whether he wanted a police officer dispatched. In Florida's Sumter County, Kennedy, the 911 coordinator, said dispatchers have been pleased with the AI system they are using to automatically transcribe and summarize every incoming 911 call. That allows other dispatchers to share that information in near real time with first responders racing to the scene of a crash or a shooting, he said. The Motorola system can also flag keywords like cardiac arrest or shooting, allowing other dispatchers to get first responders moving even while a 911 operator is still collecting information, he said. He also said real-time translation services have been successful. Depending on what foreign language someone is speaking, it can take 5 or even 10 minutes to track down a human translator. With AI, he said, people can just speak in their own language and the AI automatically translates it. You can imagine the anxiety and stress for both the call taker and the caller while you're trying to let them know help is on the way, Kennedy said. In 10 years from now, you're going to find everyone is using AI to make things more efficient. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 10 minutes after the hour. And we continue with the opening section. Gas prices, top of mind for many amid war. Rising gas prices remain a top concern for Americans amid a 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran. According to a new poll released April 7th by the Pew Research Center, 69% of Americans say they are concerned about facing higher gas and fuel prices if hostilities between the United States and Iran resume after the conclusion of the 2-week ceasefire. Among Democrats and people who lean toward voting for Democratic candidates, the poll found 79% identified rising gas prices as their top concern about the now paused war in Iran. Among Republicans and people who lean toward voting for Republicans, the poll found 59% said escalating gas prices were their top concern. The Pew Center said the survey was conducted March 23rd to 29 among 3,500 U.S. adults. Almost 7 in 10 Americans are concerned about higher gas and fuel prices as a result of the U.S. military action, including 45% who are extremely concerned, the group said. Of the potential outcomes we asked about, this one worries Americans the most. The findings also come as the national average gas price rose to $4.16 per gallon on April 8th. That figure is up from a national average of $3.25 on March 8th. How long for gas prices to come down if the ceasefire holds? Hey, good question. Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, said oil and gas prices are already showing signs of coming down in the wake of the announcement of the temporary ceasefire. Gas prices could start reversing nationally in 48 hours or so, by a few cents every day, DeHaan said in an X post on the evening of April 7th. Diesel prices may lag slightly, but where things stand now, diesel is no longer likely to reach a record. National average gasoline prices could fall below $4 in 1 to 2 weeks. Diesel less than $5 in 6 to 8 weeks. DeHaan added in an April 8th post that there are already huge drops in oil markets, and for now, he said lower fuel prices should be coming soon. DeHaan cautioned in an April 7th blog post that markets remain highly sensitive to developments in the region. He said short-term reductions in U.S. gas prices could reverse if hostilities between the United States and Iran resume after the temporary ceasefire. Until there is a clear progress toward reopening the strait or achieving a durable de-escalation, oil prices are likely to remain elevated and volatile, with geopolitical developments continuing to dominate market directions, he wrote. What can cause wide swings in gas prices across the country? Regional differences in gas prices can be explained by several factors, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. They include differences in state and local gas taxes, distance from the supply source, supply disruptions, retail competition and operating costs, and environmental programs. Retail gasoline prices tend to be higher the further gasoline must be transported to the point of sale because transportation costs are higher, the agency said. Anything that slows or stops gasoline production can result in increased bidding for available gasoline supplies, the agency added. Prices at gasoline stations are often highest in locations with fewer gasoline stations available. So which states have the highest gas prices? California has the highest gas price, with drivers there paying an average of $5.93 per gallon on April 8th. Coming in second, Hawaii at $5.62, Washington State at $5.40, Oregon at $5.01, and Nevada at $5.02. And no notice of New York there. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour. We got a couple of crime stories. Doctor found guilty of trying to kill his wife on a hike in Hawaii. A Hawaii doctor who had been charged with trying to kill his wife on a birthday hike in 2025 was convicted on April 8th of attempted manslaughter based upon extreme mental or emotional disturbance. Following a 3-week trial, a Honolulu County jury returned the verdict against Gerhard Koenig, 47, after about a day of deliberations. The jury did not convict Koenig on the higher charge of second-degree attempted murder. The attempted manslaughter charge carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Koenig's sentencing is scheduled for August 13th. Koenig was arrested in March 2025 after the Honolulu Police Department said he attempted to push his wife, Ariel Koenig, off a cliffside hiking trail in Oahu and struck her in the head with a rock. At the time, police said Ariel Koenig was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Gerhard Koenig, an anesthesiologist based in Maui, was nowhere to be found when authorities responded to the scene, but he was arrested after an hours-long manhunt. He had pleaded not guilty to second-degree attempted murder following his arrest and indictment last year. During the trial, the jury heard testimony about an emotional affair, a marriage on the rocks, and 2 very different accounts of a hellish birthday hike. Prosecutors accused Gerhard Koenig of trying to kill his wife by attempting to inject her with a mysterious syringe and shove her off a cliff. When that attempt failed, prosecutors and Ariel Koenig said he started hitting her with a rock. No syringe was found at the scene. 2 other hikers had partly witnessed the assault and corroborated Ariel Koenig's account of what happened during the beating. The assault had left Ariel covered in blood and suffering from bruising, a complex laceration of the scalp, and a fractured thumb, according to photos shown and testimony heard during the trial. I just started screaming because in my mind, he's trying to knock me unconscious to be able to drag me over the edge. I was just screaming then, as much as I could, she testified. Emil Koenig, Gerhard Koenig's son, also testified during the trial that his father called him on FaceTime after the attack occurred and confessed while splattered with her blood. Emil Koenig said his father told him he would not be making it back to Maui and to take good care of the younger kids, and that Ari, my stepmom, had been cheating on him, and that he tried to kill her. But Gerhard Koenig denied that he plotted to kill his wife or that he confessed to the crime. He testified that he had been attacked first and acted in self-defense, saying his wife pulled him to the ground, grabbed him by the testicles, and hit him in the face with a rock. And another crime story. Michigan man arrested in wife's disappearance on Bahamas boat trip. Authorities in the Bahamas have arrested a Michigan man 4 days after his wife went missing during a nighttime boat ride that left the couple's family questioning his account of what happened. The Royal Bahamas Police Department arrested Brian Hooker, 59, on April 8th. The agency said he was being questioned in connection with the disappearance of his wife, 55-year-old Lynette Hooker. Edvardo Dames, Assistant Commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police, identified Brian Hooker as a suspect in a phone interview with Reuters. A U.S. Coast Guard official told USA Today earlier that the agency also is conducting a criminal investigation into Hooker's disappearance. On April 4th, Brian Hooker reported that his wife fell overboard from an 8-foot, hard-bottomed dinghy that they were taking to a night trip from Hopetown to Elbow Bay, which are both off of Great Abaco Island, according to a news release from the Royal Bahamas Police Department. Brian Hooker said that his wife had been carrying the boat keys so the engine shut off when she fell. Then, strong currents subsequently carried her away, and he lost sight of her, police said. The agency said that Brian Hooker then paddled the dinghy to shore, which took hours, and that he arrived around 4 a.m. on April 5th. I am heartbroken over the recent boat accident in unpredictable seas and high winds that caused my beloved Lynette to fall from our small dinghy near Elbow Cay in the Bahamas, Brian Hooker wrote on Facebook about 12 hours before his arrest. Despite desperate attempts to reach her, the winds and current drove us further apart. We continue to search for her, and that is my sole focus, he wrote. Lynette and Brian Hooker have been documenting their sailing adventures on social media for years, describing themselves on TikTok as a married couple living their best life after they sailed away from BS. They've sailed to New Orleans, Miami Beach, Key West, on Lake Michigan, and most recently, throughout the Bahamas. Lynette Hooker's daughter, Carly Aylesworth, told multiple news outlets that it doesn't make sense that her mother would fall off the dinghy, saying that she was a fit and experienced mariner. She also described the couple's relationship as volatile and said it involved domestic violence. Brian Hooker has not granted any interviews. Here's what we know so far about the investigation into Lynette Hooker's disappearance. The Royal Bahamas Police Department, the lead agency in the case, has said that their investigation into Lynette's disappearance remains active, but released very few details before announcing Brian Hooker's arrest. In a news release April 7th, Royal Bahamas Police said that extensive search and rescue efforts for Hooker have included professional divers, drone technology, and a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter. Though the agency described search operations as active, it's now considered a recovery operation. Neither agencies nor Bahamian police responded to USA Today's request for more information. The Royal Bahamas Police Department is asking members of the public who may have information that could help the investigation to contact them. Social media paints Brian and Lynette Hooker as living out a retiree's dream, sailing wherever they feel like it on their own yacht, dubbed Soulmate, and complete with the Detroit Lions flag. Their home base is listed as Onstead, about 35 miles southwest of Ann Arbor, Michigan. The couple has been documenting their travels on Facebook, TikTok, and on Instagram as the Sailing Hookers. Their posts include grinning selfies, adventures such as snorkeling and scuba diving, and humble brags about enjoying the weather in the Bahamas while their loved ones back in Michigan freeze. It seems they always look to the spouse in these things, doesn't it? Rightfully so, I think. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 25 minutes after the hour, and we jump over to the USA Today opinion section. And I have a piece written by Blake Fontenay. Mr. Fontenay is USA Today's commentary editor. His column comes under the title of "The Mall Was So American." Not anymore. I don't know of many people who follow the news these days expecting it to give them warm and fuzzy feelings. Even so, it was a real gut punch when I saw a recent news alert about the demolition of Rivergate Mall in Nashville. Since malls have been in decline for decades, it wasn't a huge surprise. That didn't make it sting any less. If you are of a certain age, you might relate to this feeling. There was a time, not so long ago, when malls felt like the centers of the cultural and social universe in American communities across the country. Rivergate was built in 1971, which means I have no memory of a time when it did not exist. It was the closest mall to my childhood home in East Nashville, so my family spent a lot of time shopping there and at the businesses in its orbit while I was growing up. In my teenage years, it was one of the places where my friends and I hung out. When I returned to Nashville for a few years as a middle-aged adult, I still did some of my Christmas shopping there. Even back then, there were signs the mall would someday be headed to the big closeout sale in the sky. While I texted to a childhood friend who still lives in the area about Rivergate's demolition, he informed me that there had been several shootouts at the mall, which in his view added a little excitement to the shopping experience. So Rivergate probably was past its sell-by date. The building itself was no architectural marvel. It looked like a typical American mall, but there was something more to it than the bricks and mortar or the businesses that operated inside them. Rivergate, in its heyday, offered a sense of community that's hard to find in 2026. Malls used to be like watering holes on the Serengeti, where all sorts of creatures would gather and learn to coexist. Standalone stores attract only the particular type of people who buy the items they sell. Malls, by contrast, put many types of stores together, ensuring people with different interests and backgrounds would interact. Malls like Rivergate weren't just places to buy stuff, though. People enjoyed the experience of being there. Groups of senior citizens, attracted by the security and climate-controlled comfort, used to walk mall corridors early in the morning before the rush of shoppers arrived. Pushcart vendors offered an Americanized version of the outdoor bazaar experience popular in some foreign countries, pleading with passing shoppers to venture a little closer and sample their wares. Exasperated husbands could relax in vibrating recliners while their wives kept bargain hunting. Around Christmas time, kids could share their hopes and dreams with Santa while musicians tried to relieve some of the holiday stress. Even in a fairly large city like Nashville, there was always a chance of running into your friends or neighbors at the mall. I'm guessing people who grew up around malls across America, even if they've never been to Nashville or set foot in Rivergate, feel all of this. Like watching the Super Bowl or eating turkey at Thanksgiving, visiting the local mall was an experience most Americans had in common. Without fail, those trips seemed more fun and satisfying than doom scrolling or arguing with strangers on social media. This isn't to suggest the country should invest billions in sprucing up decrepit malls or frog march people back to shop in them. Time has moved on. Consumer habits have changed. On the same day I started writing this column, I made 2 online purchases. I'm aware of what century this is. I just think sometimes, as progress marches forward, we need to take stock of what we may be leaving behind. In a world where many of us feel isolated and lonely, trapped in our own personal bubbles, community gathering spots could offer an antidote. So Rivergate Mall is disappearing, except for 2 department stores and a guitar center. Well, it is Nashville after all. In the place of this landmark, there are plans for apartments, townhomes, senior living units, plus retail and dining space in a pedestrian-friendly master-planned community. Could the new development become the modern equivalent of a community gathering space, the way Rivergate was to earlier generations? Well, I sure hope so. We need something to fill the void in Nashville and elsewhere, and in Western New York also. And we move over to the Friday, April 10th, so-called money section of USA Today, and what has become standard now, the Friday money section is essentially travel and tourism. I'm not crazy about it, but hopefully you enjoy it. So here we go. Attitude, approach can make or break a Paris trip. There are a few things you must do as an American in Paris, but they don't necessarily include the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre Museum, or Champs-Élysées. How travelers approach the city and locals can make or break the experience. Here's what to know for your first or next Paris trip from experts. And we talked to Cecilia Jourdan, a French-American entrepreneur and educator who grew up in France and co-founded Hello French, an online platform dedicated to French language and culture with more than 2 million followers on social media. And we also consult with Emmy Renner, an American entrepreneur and food content creator who lives in Paris and highlights the city through an American lens. And here are some do's and don'ts in Paris according to these so-called experts. You can't just assume everyone does speak English, Renner said. And if you speak louder, it's not going to help the problem. In general, travelers should learn a few key words in the language of any destination they visit. Hello French has a free downloadable list of 30 essential phrases for travelers, ranging from "Do you speak English?" to "The check, please." Chief among terms to know and use are hello by day and good evening at night. More than rote greetings, they are signs of respect. Even if you have a really thick American accent and say bonjour, who cares, Jordan said. Say that with absolutely everyone when you purchase your bread at a bakery, when you sit down at a cafe. It's a great way to acknowledge the other person, and it's also an indication that you are willing to adapt to a language even though you do not speak French. If you walk into a bakery and start placing an order without exchanging greetings, Renner said staff may emphatically reply, bonjour, like, come on, what are you doing here? An American would be like, oh, that's rude, which is not rude. I think it's just polite. In the same vein, it's customary to say merci, thank you, or bonne journée, have a good day, or bonne soirée, have a good evening, or au revoir, goodbye when you leave. As far as Americanisms, I think that there are so many things that we do that we don't realize might be more abrasive to the French culture. And I think it's important to recognize those things, Renner said. Like when you're at a restaurant, you'll notice, if you're talking really loud, that's a very American thing. In French restaurants with actual French people, the volume of the restaurant will be quiet. That's not to say travelers need to change who they are. She and Jordan said separately, culture is different, and so behaviors are different, and so they can be loud, but they may get some looks, Jordan said. Be open to the different reactions of French people without taking it personally and understanding that they're being perceived with the lens of culture. It's not about you. It's about two cultures coming together and trying to adjust to things that maybe feel a bit unusual. There is, however, something else travelers should expect. If you're a tourist asking for something in a way that may sound stressed or rude, then you will be matched with that energy, Jordan said. On the flip side, she said, travelers who are open and flexible will be met the same way. Are people in Paris friendly to Americans? There is a stereotype around French people that they can be kind of rude, Renner said. I don't think that they're rude. I think they're just polite. Of course, there are some rude French people, just like there are rude Americans. But Renner said, French people can be incredibly nice and kind and welcoming. Cultural differences can account for some misunderstandings. For instance, French people are often seen as more direct. Whereas small talk is considered friendly in the United States, Jordan said that in France it's considered unnecessary and sometimes even intrusive. She noted French people may also be uncomfortable receiving compliments, though they give them in their own way. For example, instead of saying something is delicious, they may say, c'est pas mal. That's not bad. They may not, however, shy away from what would be considered hot topics in the United States, such as politics and current events. There's really the art of debate in France and the art of conversation, Jordan said. People may think that a whole table is arguing and it's really heated, where in a sense they're just debating ideas and it's the way we assert our identity, and then we can just stop the conversation. It's like, okay, we won't agree on that, and say, let's order another round of coffee, and that's it. Debates are not personal attacks, but if you're looking for a less touchy topic, she suggested discussing food. Food, I think, is an awesome subject to talk about with everyone. People you know, you don't know, she said. We really connect about that because it's about our heritage and the savoir-faire, and that's also part of our identity. So what to do in Paris? I would have a traditional French meal for sure, Jordan said, recommending her dad's restaurant, Les Colomassons, in Paris's trendy 4th arrondissement, or district, which also is known as La Marais. But there are others too, like a bistro type where you really have the typical French dishes like rabbit, like confit de canard, all the entrecôte or boneless ribeye. We love our meat. For travelers who drink alcohol, she recommended adding a good French wine, which is relatively cheap in Paris. Renner challenged tourists to be adventurous. From an American perspective, we have these ideas of what French foods are, and it's kind of like croque monsieur and beef bourguignon. And I think that there are so many amazing French foods that we've never heard of or ever even tried. Ask the waiter for the recommendation. Ask the sommelier for the recommendation with wine. I think that it's important to just kind of give yourself over to the French people because they know their menu best. Jordan also encourages travelers to try the wealth of international and fusion cuisines available in the city. Her other suggestions include popping into shops, historic covered passages, and open-air markets, even if you're not shopping. The experience of a market is incredible. You have smaller ones, bigger ones. You get to see also how French people live, Jordan said. If possible, visit at least one museum. Her favorite is the Impressionist Musée d'Orsay, which is undergoing renovation through summer 2028, but remains open. She also recommends Musée Rodin, notes has a beautiful garden, and the Paris History Museum, Musée Carnavalet, which offers free admission to its permanent exhibits. You can be on a budget, not loving arts, and still feel the depth of Paris historically just by walking in the passages, in the gardens, or just in the streets, Jourdan said. Most of all, she and Renner recommend taking your time to really explore and savor the city. If it's your first time, hopefully not your only time, you go to the few touristy spots that you would like to visit, and then you take really chunks of time wandering around the city, Jourdan said. We call that flâner in French, which is really the art of walking aimlessly, so no goals. I think it's the best way to visit not just Paris, but any city. It's just to walk around and take it all in and absorb it and be in the moment. What needs reservations in Paris? Well, first of all, restaurants. Many Parisian restaurants are relatively small, so tables fill up quickly and stay filled because dining is a leisurely event, with tables turning over less frequently. If there's a restaurant you have your heart set on and they take reservations, book them. Some restaurants, like l'Entrecôte de Paris, which is known for its steak frites, only accept walk-ups and in-person waits. And then we have Notre Dame. Reservations aren't required to visit the famed cathedral, but they can save you a lot of time compared with the standby line. Free reservations are available through Notre Dame's website up to 2 days before your intended visit. And we have certain museums. Many, but not all, Paris museums offer free admission on the first Sunday of each month. Some, like Musée d'Orsay, require reservations, while others, like Musée National Picasso Paris, do not. And what requires tickets in Paris, you might ask? Well, the Eiffel Tower. Tickets are required to ascend this iconic tower, and they do sell out, so it's best to book early through the Eiffel Tower's website. However, you can enjoy views of the Eiffel Tower for free throughout the city. The Louvre and other museums also require tickets. Louvre tickets can also sell out, so you may also want to secure those early. Visitors are encouraged to book directly through the museum and beware of fraud. On the first Friday of every month, except July and August, all visitors may enter the Louvre for free after 6 p.m. Year-round, Louvre admission is free for children under 18, European Economic Area residents, and citizens under the age of 26, and all visitors with disabilities with a certifying card. Details on other museums can be found on their websites. How should you dress in Paris? In general, Jourdan said French people are quite elegant and tend not to wear athleisure unless they're going to work out. I'm never saying to an American, don't wear athleisure, because I wear that myself, because I prioritize comfort, she said. Renner, however, warned that dressing like an obvious tourist may make you a target for pickpockets and other scammers. No matter what you pack, both she and Jourdan say to prepare for Paris's fickle weather. Carry an umbrella, a very tiny one, and have something to cover yourself. It can get really cold, and then hot, and then rain, Jourdan said, adding that weather apps can be unreliable. Packing accordingly will really make a difference. And you might ask, is it still safe to travel to Paris right now? Yes, 100%. As a woman living in the thick of the city, I definitely do feel safe, Renner said. The State Department ranks France as a level 2 destination, encouraging Americans to exercise increased caution because of possible terrorism and unrest. The State Department also issued a worldwide security alert on March 22nd amid the war in the Middle East. Travelers are encouraged to register for the State Department's free Smart Traveler Enrollment Program for alerts in the event of an emergency. However, violent crime is relatively low. Petty crime, like pickpocketing and phone theft, is more common in Paris and can be easily avoided. Do not put your phone in your back pocket. Do not have bags that don't zip. If you're going, have a crossbody. Wear it on the front of you, Renner said. I would give you the same advice if you were in New York City. And just like on the New York subway, she recommended keeping your head on a swivel on the metro. You don't need to be scared, but you need to be aware, she said, adding that she might not recommend riding the metro after midnight, but Uber is widely available. Is $1,000 enough for a week in Paris? Guess what? That depends on whether you're counting lodging. On average, a hotel room in Paris costs $265 per night in the busy summer tourist season and $220 per night during the low season of January through February. If you're not counting accommodations, you can stretch $1,000 for a week in Paris, depending on what you eat, how much you shop, and what else you do. Many restaurants offer a price fix menu with multiple courses for a reasonable price. A nice place in Paris, it can be around 25 euros for an entree, main course, and dessert, which is, $30. So that, plus a glass of wine, maybe it's like $37, Renner said. You could also get a jambon beurre, a ham and butter sandwich, for 7 euros. So it just kind of depends. Are you supposed to tip in Paris? Tips are typically already included in meal prices, and servers are paid better in France, so they don't have to rely on tips to survive. Renner said if a restaurant payment terminal ever asks you if you want to add a 20% tip, you can hit no. And that's not rude at all. The only reason why they would be showing you that is because you're an American. If you would like to tip anyway, she recommends carrying euros in coins. When we go out to a restaurant, if it's 100 euros total, we'll leave like 3 euros in coins, which sounds crazy, but a lot of French people don't tip at all. So even if you're doing a $5 tip, that's nice, she said. Just do not tip in actual US dollars. And what is the best way for tourists to get around Paris? The best way to explore the city is by foot and metro. There are 20 arrondissements within Paris, which spiral out like a snail shell with one in the center and 20 at the edge. Each one has its own history and vibe. Have an hour or 2 or 3 hours almost every single day of like, let's just pick this arrondissement and walk and see, Jordan said. Maybe you have a few things pinned, but the beautiful thing about Paris is really walking. It is a great walking city. Many of the city's sidewalks are smooth and feature curb cuts, though some areas like Montmartre can be steep, according to wheelchairtravel.org, which describes itself as the world's largest accessible travel resource. Public transit operator RATP notes that all Paris buses and trams are wheelchair accessible, as are train stations along the RER A and B lines. Portions of some metro lines may also be wheelchair accessible, but the only fully accessible metro line is the 14. So there you have it. All you need to know about Paris. How'd you like my attempt at trying to speak a little Paris when talking about these various locations? I did my best. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 49 minutes after the hour, and we continue with the travel and tourism section. Delta, Southwest raised check bag fees by at least $10. Those airlines, man, they get you every time you turn around. 2 major U.S. airlines announced new fee increases. Delta Airlines will charge many passengers more to check bags starting April 7th, with a first check bag starting at $45. And Southwest Airlines announced that it also would raise check bag fees, meaning 4 major U.S. carriers in 2 weeks have announced higher bag fees as the Iran war causes jet fuel prices to spike. Delta's changes will apply only to tickets purchased on or after April 8th on domestic and select short-haul international routes, such as flights to Canada and the Caribbean or parts of Latin America. Checked bag prices on long-haul international routes will not change. These updates are part of Delta's ongoing review of pricing across its businesses and reflect the impact of evolving global conditions and industry dynamics, a Delta spokesman said. For Southwest, the changes apply to reservations made or changed voluntarily after April 9th. The carrier, which only began implementing checked bag fees in May 2025, now also will charge $45 instead of $35 for the first checked bag, with the second bag costing $55. As part of an ongoing analysis of the business and against the evolving global backdrop, Southwest Airlines is increasing its fees on first and second checked bags by $10, a Southwest Airlines statement said. Customers who previously qualified for a free checked bag on Southwest through their credit card, frequent flyer status, or ticket class will continue to receive the perk. What are the new Delta bag fees? According to Delta, these are the new fees on applicable flights. $45 for a first checked bag. That's an increase of $10. $55 for a second bag. Another increase of $10. And get this, $200 for a third bag. That's an increase of $50 from the previous fee. Unbelievable. Premium cabin customers, elite frequent flyers, and co-branded credit card holders will maintain their free checked bag benefits. There are no changes to bag fees on long-haul international flights, which typically allow a free first checked bag for all passengers except those with basic economy tickets. Delta's announcement comes after United Airlines and JetBlue made similar changes this spring. United will charge $50 for a first checked bag and $45 for passengers who prepay. And JetBlue, not to be left behind, will charge $39 for a first checked bag during off-peak travel times, or, you guessed it, $49 during peak times, such as around holidays. Radiation risks are a concern for flyers. Flying is generally thought of as the safest way to travel, but there's a hidden danger to it. Lurking on every flight, there is one variable that could cause long-term damage to passengers and crews alike. I'm talking about the sun. Radiation exposure is rarely the first thing that comes to mind as a risk in air travel, but as new generations of planes fly at higher altitudes and over-the-pole flights continue as a common route on intercontinental itineraries, passengers and crews have an increased chance of radiation exposure. You may ask, who's at risk? The good news is there's very little risk to those who fly only occasionally, but frequent travelers and flight crews could face radiation as a greater hazard. The risk is especially low for travelers taking domestic flights in the continental United States because radiation exposure is more common closer to the poles. If they're taking a few trips domestically, this is probably not something they need to be super worried about, said a spokesman for the airline industry. If they're taking flights to Asia or Europe, or crossing an ocean, it's more likely that one of those flights is going to fly through a solar particle event. According to experts, the average radiation dose experienced on a coast-to-coast flight in the United States is equivalent to the radiation received from one chest X-ray. Routine exposure to radiation can lead to increased risk of cancer and other health-related issues, including pregnancy complications. So how can you avoid radiation exposure? The best thing to do if you're an at-risk flyer, particularly if you're pregnant or trying to become pregnant, is to check the space weather forecast and avoid flying during high-intensity radiation events. Beyond that, it's important to emphasize that risk is low for most travelers, but basic precautions can still help lessen the effects of any exposure you do experience. People should wear sunscreen. They should drink lots of water on the plane. Stay hydrated. There are things you can do to make the exposure have less of an impact. While sunscreen won't protect you from radiation exposure directly, skin cancer is one of the common complications of radiation exposure while flying, and sunscreen can help prevent some of the ultraviolet radiation effects. I wrap myself in lead every time I take a flight, completely protected from any form of radiation. You are listening to reading of articles and features from USA Today for Friday, April 10th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been me, Chet Walzek. Thanks for joining in today. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you next time and hope you have a wonderful, beautiful, great weekend.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Nancy. So we're on to section B, which is the life section. Here's one from streaming. Levy owns up to mistakes, honors strong women, from Aaron Jensen. In his new Netflix comedy, Dan Levy is once again up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. The Toronto-born Levy, who dreamed up the Fish Out of Water show with his father, Eugene Levy, is now star and co-creator of the half-hour-ish crime comedy Big Mistakes. Season 1 now streaming in its entirety. Levy, age 42, stars as Nicky, a pastor who plans on changing congregations once his mom Linda, played by Laurie Metcalf, concludes her mayoral run, so he can be open about his boyfriend. Nicky's life is upended when his sister Morgan, played by Taylor Ortega, steals a necklace for their dying grandmother from a boutique with ties to a criminal organization. The siblings are then forced to become accomplices. Like Schitt's Creek, Big Mistakes, co-created with Rachel Sennett, gives Levy a chance to cannonball into comedy while playing off strong mother and sister characters. The late Catherine O'Hara and Annie Murphy both won Emmys when the series swept the comedy categories in 2020 for their portrayals of Moira and Alexis Rose, who were forced to move to a small town after a scamming business manager made off with their fortune. I love writing these parts, Levy says, seated between his co-stars Metcalf and Ortega. I find women to be far more superior to men in comedy. I love it. I've always been drawn to female voices in comedy. I grew up watching Lucille Ball. I grew up watching Mary Tyler Moore. All of these incredible, funny women. It's just been a life goal to continue to tell their stories, and I've been so lucky to have these casts stacked with unbelievably talented actresses. Metcalf, age 70, signed on for Big Mistakes before even reading the pilot, because I knew the script was written by Dan, so I knew that it was going to be great, she says. Metcalf loved it immediately, she says, pointing to the impassioned Linda's intensity as her favorite part of the role. Nobody expects you to be like that, Natalie, Linda tells Nicky and Morgan in the first episode, referencing their younger sister, played by Abby Quinn. She's an anomaly in this family. Confident, ambitious. She doesn't have to work for that body. But could the two of you, for once, set your differences aside and make my mother's death easy on me? Writing Linda brought great joy, Levy says. She cares so much about her family. She cares so much about her job. She cares so much about how she's perceived, Levy says. And when you care so much about everything, of course you're going to be operating at a 9 or 10 most of the time. But it's an endearing quality, which I think creates this soft cushioning under her, under some of the intensity that makes Linda such a lovely character, too. Ortega, age 36, identifies Morgan as the most close-to-self character that I've ever been asked to audition for. Morgan once dreamed of being an actress in New York and is growing restless as a school teacher in a stale relationship with Max, played by Jack Innan, whom she has known forever. Dabbling in crime provides the exhilaration Morgan longs for. The only good thing about a life of crime is that you have a thrilling life that is more exciting than other people's, Ortega says when assessing if she'd make a good criminal. And maybe there's a small bit of that in what we do for a living, because it's an odd career. It asks you to make certain personal sacrifices, but the payoff is, for better or worse, it is really exciting. For Metcalf and Levy, characters as culprits leave a lot to be desired. I'm not a risk taker, Metcalf says. The stress level would be too high for me. I'd be dead in the water, Levy says. I'd have to have a very honest conversation with the criminal and just say, listen, we're at a crossroads. You have one of two ways through this. Let me go or do something. But either way, a decision needs to be made immediately because there's no trial and error here. I'm going to be dead weight from the minute you bring me onto your operation. Stage. Joyous Jellicle Ball will win over even Cats haters. From Patrick Ryan. The cat's finally out of the bag. Nearly 2 years after Cats, the Jellicle Ball cast its miraculous spell off Broadway. The bold and buzzy reimagining of Andrew Lloyd Webber's divisive phenomenon has pounced uptown to the Broadhurst Theater, with feather boas and kitten heels sublimely in tow. And even on a slightly shorter runway, this remains a galvanic, gag-worthy production that dares to think outside the litter box. Based on a series of 1939 poems by T.S. Eliot, Cats always has been somewhat of a head-scratcher, unspooling a loose yarn about a group of junkyard tabbies competing for a spot in the Heaviside Layer, which is essentially feline heaven. The show is gloriously nonsensical, a vague excuse to watch a revolving door of spotlight-hungry pussycats prancing their paws to Webber's waggish earworms. For that very reason, the musical has long had a clouder of detractors who gleefully kept their claws out for the 2019 big screen abomination featuring Taylor Swift. Tremendously reconceived by Zaylen Levington and Bill Roche, Jellicle Ball transports the action to New York's vibrant queer ballroom scene. Immortalized in the 1990 documentary Paris is Burning and Emmy-winning FX series Pose. Here, a lively litter of contestants spin, strut, and duckwalk for the chance to clinch golden trophies, as well as a place in the annals of ballroom history. With this sparkling new framing device, the ethos of Cats instantly clicks into place, becoming an enormously affecting story about an ostracized community that finds belonging and redemption through their art. Tempress, Chastity Moore, a trans woman and ballroom icon, uncovers staggering new shades of fallen star Grisabella, who's desperate for compassion in a world that affords her none. She imbues the show's signature anthem, Memory, with palpable yearning and hard-fought resilience that handily summons the waterworks. Junior LaBeija, a member of the famed House of LaBeija, gives grace and gravitas to the wistful Gus the theater cat, who looks back on the changing times with both gruff disdain and fondness, and the ever-regal yet playful Andre de Shields helps bridge the gap between generations as Old Deuteronomy, making the crowd erupt with every deliriously deployed swivel of his hips during an infectious, drawn-out dance break mid-show. The production is lovingly reverent to its history. It begins with a DJ, played by Ken Ard, sifting through Beyonce and Diana Ross records before blowing the glitter off an old Cats vinyl. The moments of happiness, too, becomes a heart-rendering tribute to queer rebellion, as Old Dut extols the importance of passed-down history to a kind-hearted kitten, played by Teddy Wilson Jr., all while images of real-world ballroom trailblazers are projected in the background. But what's impossible to fully articulate is the amount of sheer euphoria that bursts off the stage. At the Canaveras Perlman Performing Arts Center, off-Broadway, Jellicle Ball was done in the round on a narrowing runway that stretched across the venue. The performers are somewhat limited in how much they can stunt down the runway in the more intimate Broadhurst, but the narrative also has come into sharper focus in a smaller setting. The cozier digs allow you to sit in the beautiful chaos of the ballroom, dancers touching up their lipstick and hot gluing garments before the show, or hugging and laughing between challenges. The whimsical tomfoolery of the gazelle-like magical Mr. Mistopheles, the impossibly striking Robert Silk Mason, is more clearly rendered, as are the mischievous antics of the shoplifting Macavity, Naomi, bringing fierce hilarity and unexpected pathos to the show's ostensible outrageous villain. Choreographers Omari Wiles and Arturo Lyons have breathed dazzling new life into each and every number. Buster Jones, typically a groaner, is now a giddy celebration of bodies big and small, while Malmongeri and Rumpelteazer is revamped as a vivacious, voguing challenge between dueling pairs. Played by David Hushes, one of the felonious felines, is a jaw-dropping knockout who commands your attention whenever she takes the runway. Every character, from MTA conductor Skimblhanks, played by Emma Sophia, to vocal powerhouse Demeter, played by Bea Nicole Johnson, is etched with so much scintillating personality that it seems like a Macavity-level crime to single out any one person. The entire cast is dressed to the gods by costume designer Queen Jean, and with an assist from Beats arranger Trevor Holder, Weber's score has been giving a dizzying, club-ready facelift that's firmly planted in disco and house music. Cats, the Jellicle Ball, is overflowing with so much unbridled joy that you may sometimes catch yourself shedding tears, for no other reason that you simply don't want it to end. It's a transcendent, glitter-drenched revival that breaks all the rules of what Broadway can be, and in turn creates something that is utterly extraordinary. Cats, the Jellicle Ball, is now playing at the Broadhurst Theater, 235 West 44th Street. Here's one from books. What's in a Name? McFadden reveals her true identity. From Claire Mulroy. The best-selling author, known to the world as Frida McFadden, is revealing her true identity. McFadden, whose prolific output includes The Housemaid and other domestic thrillers, uses a pseudonym, wig, and glasses to maintain her privacy in public. When she first began publishing, she lived a Hannah Montana-worthy double life as a doctor, but kept the two personas separate. It may seem like a mystery ripped from one of her books, but McFadden never intended it to be. But as her popularity grew, so did The Secret. On the heels of the first Housemaid movie, starring Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried, and a second one on the way, not to mention a slew of new bestsellers, McFadden says it's time to reveal her identity. I'm at a point in my career when I'm tired of this being a secret. I'm tired of people debating if I'm a real person or if I'm three men, McFadden says. I'm a real person, and I have a real identity, and I don't have anything to hide. McFadden reveals real identity to USA Today. Outside of the book world, McFadden is Sarah Cohn, a doctor who treats brain disorders. And though it looks like a disguise, she really does wear glasses. The hair is a wig, but only because I have no idea how to style my hair, she tells USA Today in a phone interview. It's so much more boring than anything that happens in my books, McFadden says. McFadden only created the synonym because she didn't want her writing career to conflict with her hospital job. My whole goal was to keep it as a secret until I was ready to step back from my doctor job, so it wouldn't be like everyone I worked with suddenly knew and it compromised my ability to do my job, McFadden says. In late 2023, she stopped working full-time. But I've stepped away from my job. I'm only working like once or twice a month. But her coworkers did find out, she says, and they were really nice about it and kept her secret. Many of them were fans of her books and had no idea they were working with the author herself. She has started bringing books into the hospital. I just realized I was completely overwhelmed from trying to do both, she says. Though McFadden is now unmasked, she's adamant she's still the same writer her readers know and love. She's glad to have shed the secret she never meant to keep, but she wants the book world to still know her as Frida. Even though I haven't told my real name until now, I feel like I've shared the real me all along, and everything I've told them has been the truth, McFadden says. Even though the name will be a surprise, nothing else will. I've always been genuine with my readers. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Naga Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time's 30 minutes after the hour. Here's one from music. Hornsby Knows the Way It Is, on tour and on record, from Melissa Ruggieri. Bruce Hornsby wasn't planning to write a new album, or even new songs. After a nearly 7-year span from 2019, when he'd written more than 40 compositions for 4 records and collaborated with New York Chamber Sextet Music, Bon Iver frontman Justin Vernon, and Shine founder James Mercer, he was admittedly burned out. Then the gem of an idea for what would become the title track to his new album, Indigo Park, out now, infiltrated his brain. I was giving it the stiff arm for months and months, Hornsby, age 71, says, chatting from the wood-paneled studio at his longtime scenic home in Williamsburg, Virginia. My next move is into a pine box, he jokes. But he couldn't quash the burgeoning song concept. It would wake me up in the middle of the night, so I finally said, okay, I'll take this deep dive and write the song, Hornsby says. A lot of this record could be called my Roger McGuinn record because the Rickenbacker 12-string is in full force. Indeed, though Hornsby's heady musicianship as a pianist is well documented, he also is playing the electric 12-string guitar on the first 5 songs of what he calls a pretty wild record. A musical adventure is expected from an artist who broke into the mainstream in 1986 with the philosophical jazz pop smash, The Way It Is, hardly typical MTV fodder. Co-wrote and played on Don Henley's The End of the Innocents, toured for a couple years with the Grateful Dead, composed numerous scores for Spike Lee's films, and worked with artists including Chaka Khan, Stevie Nicks, Robbie Robertson, and Bonnie Raitt. The last adds to the electronic spiked, beat-propelled ecstatic, while Vampire Weekend's Ezra Koenig guests on the sprightly Memory Palace, and late Grateful Dead stalwart Bob Weir adds his unconventional style to Might As Well Be Me, Florinda. The cerebral Hornsby, who will tour most of the year starting April 9th with his band The Noisemakers, delved into how The Way It Is still resonates, working with Weir and Raitt on Indigo Park, and why hallway walking is his fallback exercise. This interview has been edited for length and clarity. Question: before we talk about the new album, it's the 40th anniversary of The Way It Is. When you wrote the lyrics, Some Things Will Never Change, what were you thinking about? Answer: I was just reflecting on my upbringing. growing up in a small Upper South town where those narrow-minded attitudes prevailed. That's how I grew up. It's referenced in a sort of interesting way on this new record on Silhouette Shadows, which is a look-back song. The last verse is about where I was and what happened when Kennedy was assassinated. He recites the lyrics. The kids erupted in glee, shouting hooray, Nixon can take over. Ms. Nimmo jumped their ass and tore 'em down. I was really alarmed and confused, watching the children parroting parents' views. And that was sort of Exhibit A of the pervasive mindset in Williamsburg, Virginia at that time. And The Way It Is sort of another version of that. And the song has lived on. It seems to be a song set up for the ages, and that's lucky me. The hip-hop community's embrace of The Way It Is plays no small part. Tupac's is, of course, the most notable, 1998's Changes, but hell, in 2021, the great Chicago young rapper Polo G did an amazing version called Wishing for a Hero. It was basically his homage to Tupac, but then he laughs, it's my song. But he had a beautiful gospel choir, so it's still being sort of refreshed in that way. Is it the one song you can't take out of your set list? Well, occasionally I won't do it. And the reason I won't do it is that we're up there and the place is so deeply involved and so intensely demonstrative about the music that I go, well, you know, we don't need to play this tonight because the audience is so ready to receive what we're doing now. But invariably, I'll get a nasty Facebook or Instagram screed from some fan, quote unquote, who's not really a fan, but he knows your hits. Exactly. I understand that. But I'm not going to be a prisoner to that idea, that I have to be that guy who plays those old songs. I could never do that. I'd rather teach driver's ed than do that. What's the backstory on getting Bob Weir on Might As Well Be Me, Florinda? I ran into him at the Robbie Robertson tribute concert at the Forum in Los Angeles in October 2024, a few months after he had passed. It was a wonderful night, and we were hanging out in this bus, and I thought, this might be a good match, Bobby and this song. So I told him I had this song I wrote with longtime Grateful Dead collaborator Robert Hunter. And if you hear yourself singing on it, great. He went, send it to me. Yep, maybe. Oh, forget it, I'm in. It was so funny, so great. We finally got it to him in May last year, and he sent us this wild vocal. His vocal's crazy. It's so him. It really was just perfect, and that was really lucky. You never know when you ask somebody to perform for you what it will be like when you get it back. We called and gave him all the laudatory remarks, and then he went off to do the Dead and Company Golden Gate Park concerts. I was hearing little rumblings about some health challenges that he was dealing with then. I didn't hear anything else, and all of a sudden, wham, in January, I got the call about his passing. That stuff hits hard because you're not expecting it. So I feel fortunate and so happy we have this last little recorded document that might be the last thing he recorded. It's also great to hear Bonnie Raitt's voice on Ecstatic. You played on her I Can't Make You Love Me, and the last time you were on record together was for your 1993 Harbor Lights album. Why was this the ideal song for her? I thought that it was not her standard wheelhouse. Stylistically, it's not a bluesy thing. I did give her one blues thing, and she said, hey, thanks, at least I've gone this one thing where I can lay into a blues note. Hornsby sings, I'm committed to the unseen. It's that line. So I thought if she was feeling adventurous that this would be something fun for her. Bonnie, I feel like she's my big sister in music. We've been so close. We'll get on the phone and talk for an hour often. Let's talk about the upcoming tour. You've spent so much of your career on the road. Do you still tolerate it well? I hate it. Well, tolerate, yeah, and here's why. It's a 2.5 hours of playing that's great fun. I always say it's more fun than anything you can do outside of a bed, and that's still true. But the other 21 hours, the long bus rides, the overnight rides, when you're in the bunk and you're being jostled by the funky road. Who likes that? I mean, Bob Dylan probably likes it, he laughs, because he's done this never-ending tour for 25 years plus. So that's my conflicted feeling about the road. Love the playing, the rest you can have. Do you try to get out and go for a walk or do something to break the monotony when you're traveling? I have my routine, and it includes a walk. I'm also good at hall walking when it's terrible weather. You mentioned that you also do that at home when it's too cold to go outside. Yeah, although in my house I don't have maids looking at me going, "Who is this tall, goofy guy who keeps passing by?" Now it's Section C, which is sports. The all-business quarterback. Fernando Mendoza's NFL-ready preparation rooted in passion for finance. From Chris Bombecca. Of the 300 students Steve Etter teaches every semester, more than 95%, according to Etter's best estimate, perform financial functions via Microsoft Excel. The vast minority rely on the traditional handwritten method, using formulas, a pencil, and a piece of paper. And those who watched college football in 2025 can easily assume which category Fernando Mendoza falls into. Fernando is a formula guy, Etter said. I guess the way I would say it, he's a throwback. Etter taught Mendoza at the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley, first in a financial literacy course geared towards athletes, and later in corporate finance. By now, most are aware of Mendoza's business acumen and the professional path almost taken. Mendoza used his name, image, and likeness, NIL, earnings to pay for his final 3 classes at Haas, so he could graduate in 3 years. He pursued a master's degree at Indiana University, the school he led to its first national title last season, while he took home the Heisman Trophy. Now he's nearly a lock to be the #1 pick in the NFL draft on April 23rd by the Las Vegas Raiders. You could just see it. I saw it early with Fernando, Etter said. I remember when he got to Cal how poised he was. And when you watch that Heisman Trophy speech, he practiced his craft in the classroom, in the locker room, on the field, where he developed that presence over time. He's had a mission that you could see his eyes on, and everything he did was to get to that moment. Of course, there was the alternate reality in which Cal never offered a scholarship, and Mendoza stuck to his plan of attending Yale. Maybe the NFL still would have been an option, but what would have been more likely, Mendoza said, was a career path in finance that would have started on Wall Street as an analyst. First of all, I thought it would have been a very cool experience to be around people who are a lot smarter than me and make friends with those people, just like I did at Berkeley, Mendoza told USA Today Sports. During the college football playoff, Mendoza confirmed that a LinkedIn account had gone viral. The internships were legit and included his football captaincies, actually belonged to him. It remains his lone form of social media. I think there's a lot of value in financial careers, as not only you are able to support and provide for your family, you can also change other people's lives, such as U.S. Bank does, he said. Mendoza spoke to USA Today Sports through his partnership with U.S. Bank and its Financial Edge program. Helping people maximize financial growth is rewarding to Mendoza. With his pro career about to start and one foot dipped into the financial space, he has the best of both worlds with this role, he said. Who knows, maybe in the future, after football, there can be a career with that, he said. Mendoza has leaned on mentors to help him find success both on and off the field. The best business advice Mendoza, who completed 72% of his throws for 3,535 yards with 41 touchdowns and 6 interceptions last season, has heard it is also what football coaches like to espouse: have a growth mindset. Financial literacy, it changes every single day, he said. Doing things the old-fashioned way, by the book, became Mendoza's calling card at Cal, Etter said. He led group meetings and performed his part, even as the big man on campus and the Golden Bears' starting quarterback. Etter said Mendoza is somebody who is passionate about his Cuban heritage, his faith, the people around him, and business. The 4 legs of the Fernando chair, said Etter, who has lectured at Haas for 31 years. The human being you see and ask yourself, is this guy real? And the answer is yeah. Everything is genuine and from inside. Mendoza doesn't avoid attention. He absorbs the publicity that comes with being a Heisman winner, an eventual NFL franchise quarterback, without it affecting his attitude toward others, which creates trust and confidence from his colleagues, Etter said. A lot of people are out to get notoriety and expand their brand through social media and marketing, he said. I see him focused on himself, not focused on his brand. He worries about himself. The money Mendoza made from NIL deals helped him finish his Berkeley degree, and he also paid for biomedical scans. Other than that, he famously doesn't spend money on himself. My mindset is that if I can invest in the market and invest in myself, whatever that return may be, not only in the market, but also in my growth and development, I think that's the best investment I can make, Mendoza said. At Cal, Mendoza had a pair of internships. On top of his football duties, it felt like he was balancing 2 jobs. His optimistic, happy-go-lucky attitude helped once he realized that his internship was an interview for a full-time job down the line. One summer, he worked for a commercial real estate firm and was asked to run data on an Excel sheet. The specifics of the request, however, he underestimated. What Mendoza thought would be an easy task turned into an all-night assignment. Mendoza likes to think about inputs and outputs, which is why ROI, return on investment, is his favorite financial acronym. His favorite Excel trick is also relatively rudimentary, VLOOKUP. Sometimes, Mendoza said, you gotta check it down. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time's 50 minutes after the hour. Gary Player gives advice to Tiger Woods after DUI arrest, from Mark Giannetto. The most outspoken of the honorary starters at the 2026 Masters doesn't blame Tiger Woods for taking medication for pain management and sleep deprivation. But Gary Player believes there's an easy solution to Woods' problems. All you gotta do is don't drive a car and get a chauffeur, the 90-year-old South African said at a news conference on April 9th after hitting a ceremonial first tee shot with fellow golf legends Jack Nicklaus and Tom Watson to officially begin the 90th edition. Player had been asked to offer advice to Woods following his recent DUI arrest, and the 3-time Masters winner initially expressed empathy for what Woods endured in recent years due to the injuries and surgeries on his legs and back. But Player said emphatically it's time for Woods to give up driving if he continues to take prescription medicine to alleviate the after effects of those ailments. Do I blame him for taking medicine? Hell no, Player said. He has sleep deprivation. Do I blame him for taking something to help him sleep? No, but I don't think he should drive a car. When you're taking that medicine, it's dangerous when you're driving a car. Same as it's dangerous when you look at your cell phone in the car. Woods, age 50, was attempting to play at the Masters this week, but those plans were thrown into disarray after another car crash near his home in Jupiter Island, Florida. An arrest affidavit revealed that officers found 2 hydrocodone pills in Woods' pocket after the crash, and Woods announced he would seek treatment and focus on my health. Florida prosecutors said in a state court filing on April 7th they want to issue a subpoena seeking copies of any and all prescription medicines on file for Woods as part of the case. Woods was reported to have been driving fast on a residential street on Jupiter Island near his home March 27th when he clipped the back of a pressure washing trailer being towed by a truck. His SUV rolled on its side and skidded down the street, and he climbed out of the skyward-facing passenger window. Woods pleaded not guilty to DUI with property damage. He blew a 0.00 on 2 alcohol breath tests, but declined to submit to a urinalysis, which triggered a relatively new Florida law under which drivers who refuse a breath or urine test face a second-degree misdemeanor charge, an automatic 1-year driver's license suspension, and up to 60 days in jail. If it were up to Player, Woods would consider making this the last time he gets behind the wheel. I mean, my reflexes I think are as good as when I was 20, but I don't drive anymore. I get a chauffeur, and I think that's the answer to it, Player said. Cousins wants the best player to be the Raiders' first quarterback. From Jacob Kemaker. Quarterback Kirk Cousins had a clear message for coach Clint Kubiak during his introductory news conference after joining the Las Vegas Raiders. While Cousins, a 37-year-old veteran who has made 167 starts, acknowledged he would like to continue starting, he wants the Raiders to do what's best for the team. The best player needs to play, Cousins told reporters. If that's not me, I don't want to be out there. I don't think that's the best thing for the team. If I'm the best option, then I believe it's important that those guys are out there. Regardless of whether he starts, Cousins is looking forward to providing the Raiders with veteran leadership as Kubiak enters his first season as coach. I'm excited to get the chance to lead, help influence in the locker room, do my part, and, most importantly, help our team win, Cousins said. The Raiders hold the number 1 selection. The pick is almost certain to be Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, who led the Hoosiers to an undefeated season and their first national title, while also winning the Heisman Trophy. Cousins got a chance to meet Mendoza when the top prospect visited the Raiders for his pre-draft visit on April 7th, which also happened to be the day Las Vegas opened its off-season camp. He seems like a high-caliber person, and if we're fortunate enough to get him here, then it'll be a privilege to work together, Cousins said. Cousins remains the early favorite to start after Kubiak expressed his preference for rookie quarterbacks to be given time to develop behind veterans in a perfect world. The likely number 1 pick isn't attending the NFL draft, from Nick Brinkenhoff. Home is where the heart is. You might have a sign with that saying hanging on a wall somewhere. Whether or not that's true in your case is something only you'll know. But Fernando Mendoza doesn't have to think twice about it. From just another guy to the presumptive number 1 pick in the 2026 NFL draft, the future Las Vegas Raiders quarterback hasn't forgotten his roots. The Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and national champion from the Indiana Hoosiers, Mendoza has been on a meteoric rise over the last calendar year. All that work in the college ranks will culminate to the chance to lead Tom Brady's team in the NFL. However, don't expect some grand celebration in Pittsburgh when Mendoza's name is called, because he won't be there. He'll be at home, where the heart is. Mendoza is opting to watch the draft back at home in Miami with family and friends, according to multiple reports. Logistically speaking, it's a move that makes the most sense, given that the night figures to be a quick one for Mendoza. Instead of shaking Roger Goodell's hand and holding up a Raiders jersey for a picture, he will be surrounded by the people who got him to this point. Mendoza wants to share the draft experience with his family in Miami, ESPN's Adam Schefter said, and the quarterback has never been shy about how much that stuff means to him. Before he officially gets drafted to a place that will move him across the country, Mendoza will have the chance to share the moment with his best friend and inspiration, his mother, Elsa. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 18 years ago. The quarterback shared that his mom has a tough time moving around at this point in her battle, which he detailed in an interview with Hoosier Connect, Indiana's name, image, and likeness collective. She was in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten championship game and was seen in a wheelchair. At this point, she has a tough time moving around and stuff like that. But her happiness, her joy, and her determination is what inspires me every single day. And that's what pushes me, he said. You know, if I'm in a workout and I'm feeling tired, a little thought in my mind goes, maybe you should skip on this set, or something like that. I'll be like, my mom is out here every single day, putting a ton of work, a ton of dedication, and still with a great attitude, a great positive attitude in everything she does. By deciding to stay home, Mendoza gets the best of both worlds. He'll be seated next to the people that truly matter and experience a life-changing call, all from the comforts of home. The last number 1 overall pick to not attend the draft was defensive end Travon Walker in 2022. He was at home with friends and family in Thomastown, Georgia, when the Jacksonville Jaguars made him the first player off the board. Trevor Lawrence, also selected by the Jaguars, was the most recent number 1 overall quarterback not to attend the draft in 2021. Unresolved return very much on Vaughn's mind, from Nancy Armour. Lindsey Vaughn can't be broken. Her bones and other body parts, yes, but her spirit and resilience remained unshakable. It's been about 2 months since the horrific crash during the downhill at the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics that left Vaughn with a compound fracture and tibial plateau fracture in her left leg, as well as a broken right ankle. Though she is still on crutches, she should be off them within the month. She's starting to resume a normal life. She was able to travel to Los Angeles this week, and being around people again has been wonderful, she said. There are still moments of sadness and pain and disappointment, but Vaughn is determined to keep forging ahead, as she always has. Because I've been through so much, I think that it's allowed me to keep fighting and keep a good perspective, she told USA Today Sports on April 7th. And while I do get very low at times, I think I can still see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can still try to keep that positive mindset. I don't know where my life will take me going forward, but I do know that I just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I'll find my way to whatever path that I end up going down. Vaughn, age 41, has had 5 surgeries since the February 8th crash, including a fasciotomy to save her left leg, after she developed compartment syndrome. She was hospitalized for about 2 weeks, first in Treviso, Italy, and then in Colorado, and has said it will take about a year for her injuries to heal completely. She's diligently doing rehab and will have one more surgery to remove all the hardware in her leg and repair her left ACL, which she tore before the games. I honestly still haven't processed the crash because I've been so focused on the surgeries and the rehab and kind of in more of a survival mode. I haven't really had time to just sit and reflect. I've been just trying to make sure that I can do the things that I love moving forward in my life, said Vaughn, who spoke to USA Today Sports as part of Vengeance Antibodies for Anybody campaign. In some ways, it feels I'm still waiting for my Olympic run that I never got to finish. And in some ways, I feel like it's so far away and almost never happened. It's a weird reality to be in. Mother's influence helps Vaughn through recovery. Vaughn has always had an ability to rebound, be it from injuries or personal heartbreaks. She credits her mother, Linda Crone, who died in August 2022, a year after being diagnosed with ALS. She was so positive and uplifting. No matter how bad things got, she always had something positive to say, Vaughn said. Even when she had ALS and in her hospital bed, she was never negative. She was never down. She always tried to look at the bright side of everything. Vaughn will not pretend these last 2 months have been easy, being isolated, first in the hospital and now as she rehabs, is tough, and there have been days she's been balled up in a corner. But her mother's voice is always in her head. Even though this is very severe, I can still come back. I'll be okay, she said. I have an amazing group of doctors and support systems that are helping me get through this, and I will get on the other side of it. I just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. What's next? Awful as the crash and its aftermath have been, Vaughn hasn't ruled out racing again, and it's not just because she has nothing else in her life. Vaughn built a full life for herself after she retired from competitive skiing in 2019. She has a foundation devoted to empowering young women in underserved communities. She has a portfolio of investments and is on the board of Athena Capital. She works with sponsors. She has a tight-knit family and a circle of friends. But once she came out of retirement, Vaughn envisioned a very different end for her career. Being airlifted off the mountain at the Olympics was never part of that picture. I know that I don't like the way it ended, she said. I think I could have been a fairy tale ending, and it wasn't. But that's also life. I may not get what I want. That may be it, and I'll live with that and be happy for the journey that I'm able to go on. But Vaughn would love the chance to say goodbye. To fans, yes, but also to the women she raced with and against. She spent years with many of them, more time than she spent with her family, and not saying goodbye feels unresolved. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be racing again to have that opportunity. So I think I'm just going to take my time to recover. I still have one more surgery left in a few months, and then as time goes on, I think the answer will become more clear. Season to remember. Whether she skis competitively again or not, Vaughn will take the memories of the season with her. Largely overshadowed by the crash is the incredible comeback she'd made. Vaughn was on the podium in every downhill race ahead of the Olympics, including 2 wins. She also made the podium twice in Super G. It was an incredible season. I think that it was some of the most consistent skiing that I had potentially done in my career. I think it was some of the most dynamic skiing that I had done in my career, she said. I won the first race of the season by almost a second, she added. I know I surprised a lot of people, especially my competitors, when I did that. And I tried to focus on that moment and how special that was. Vaughn tore her left ACL in a crash in the final downhill race before the Olympics. Despite what some armchair ski experts suggested, the ACL wasn't a factor in her crash in Cortina. Her right knee was in far worse shape at the World Championships in 2019, her last event before she retired, and Vaughn still won a bronze medal there. The day before the downhill, she'd posted the third fastest training run. The ACL didn't have an effect on my crash. My age didn't have an effect on my crash, Vaughn said. She simply got a few inches off her line. When she hooked her arm on a gate, it sent her spinning, and there was no way to recover. It's just the nature of my sport. It's the danger of downhill, and that's why it's exciting, is that you can win or lose, and the margins are so thin, Vaughn said. I don't think people really understand that, and I wish I could explain it better. But in some ways, like I said, it's not worth the explanation. I know I was ready. I know I was strong. I know I was capable of winning that race. I made a mistake, and that's life. I have to live with it. But even after everything, she's no regrets, nor will she change how she approaches life, regardless of what comes next. I'm excited to keep trying to push the limits in whatever it is I do now. And that's exciting, she said. I have a lot to look forward to, and I'm very thankful for all of it. You've been listening to a reading of the USA Today for April 10th. We read the USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555. Your reader for this hour has been Nancy.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 2 of Twice by Mitch Albom. Following that, at 3 o'clock is New York Magazine, and at 4 o'clock, a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio Reading serves people who are blind or have a print disability throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. From its broadcast studios at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, just north of Clinton Street. Almost 40 years and more than 300,000 hours of radio readings to those unable to read printed matter on their own. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter. People who are blind or have a print disability throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula are provided special reading radios. This year, the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service marks almost 40 years on the air. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Service studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service website is nfradioreading.org. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555.
Welcome to Independent Perspective, a public affairs presentation of Western New York Independent Living. Our guest today is Kelly Lalka, the Education Program Manager of the Western New York chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and I'm your host, Ernie Churchwell. Welcome to the program, Kylie.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And I thought we should probably clear up some misunderstandings about Alzheimer's right at the beginning. I gather senility is a term which is really out of fashion, kind of like calling someone with an intellectual disability retarded or something. It just isn't done these days. But there is apparently a distinction between Alzheimer's and, oh heavens, what's the other term that we mentioned just a moment ago?
Dementia.
Dementia, okay. If you could explain the differential between those two, please.
Yes, I would love to. So I do hear those words, Alzheimer's and dementia, used interchangeably often, but the fact is that they are actually two different terms. So we like to refer to dementia as what we call an umbrella term. It's an overarching term. So the definition of dementia is actually a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. So that's the definition of dementia. So dementia is something's happening in the brain, but what's causing it? Alzheimer's is actually the greatest known cause of dementia. So out of all dementia cases, about 60 to 80% of those folks living with dementia have Alzheimer's specifically. And there's about over 80 different causes or types or forms of dementia under that vast umbrella. And so I typically like to tell people, puts it into perspective a little bit, all Alzheimer's is dementia, but not all dementia is Alzheimer's.
Did I remember hearing on the news a short time ago that there was a breakthrough that had occurred which might help people with dementia?
Yeah, so there are a few new drugs that have been approved by the FDA in the last few years. We are now referring to this time as the era of treatment. So before 2021, there was no treatment out there that would help to slow down the disease. There were medications developed and approved by the FDA that would help to control the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. But a few years ago, we started developing drugs that can slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So it is not a cure. It does not reverse it by any means. However, it does give folks living with dementia or living with Alzheimer's disease more time. So it does have the ability to slow down the disease, but not stop it or cure it.
What does the Alzheimer's Association do to help people deal with this affliction?
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Association, we are a national organization. So any community across the country has access to a local chapter. Our chapter is Western New York, so we cover all 8 counties of Western New York, which includes Allegheny, Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, Erie, Genesee, Niagara, Orleans, and Wyoming. And so all of our programs and services that we offer to the community is completely free. So we have education classes for caregivers and for people living with dementia. We have support groups. We have care consultations, which are one-on-one conversations with folks where we can help point them in the right direction or just be emotional support to them. We often have a lot of resources. We can point you in the right direction, and we're just there for that support. We often have some really great grants in which we're able to supply some services or some products, but we are there to be that support for those families living with Alzheimer's or any other form of dementia.
You know, we must have been having fun because the time has flown. We're just about out of it. I'm sure people will have questions. How can they reach you?
Absolutely. We have a 24/7 helpline number that is truly available at all times. That number is 800-272-3900, and our website is alz.org.
Thanks so much for being with us, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Independent Perspective, a public affairs presentation of Western New York Independent Living. Our guest today was Kaylee Lalka, Education Program Manager of the Western New York chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and I've been your host, Ernie Churchwell.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a serialized reading